Visuals can be found here in the visualizations column in the right part of the screen, and there we can now simply select any visual that might be appropriate for our analysis. I, for example, go for this stacked column chart here. So I click onto the symbol, and there we see our template, so to say, for a specific visual, which we can move around here or which we can also increase in size. And in some cases, the filters menu here can be collapsed, so you can always expand or collapse any of these menus here to the right. I'll keep the filters opened here for the moment, as we'll need these in a few seconds. At the moment, this is an empty visual, so therefore we need to add data to this visual, and we can do this via this fields column here to the right. We can open this query 1 connection here, and there we see the different column names that we had before in the query editor as so-called fields. Now we can drag and drop these fields into dedicated areas of that visual, and with that, the values that field or that column holds will be added to that visual. For example, for such a chart that we have right here, the axis value, so for the x-axis down here, could be the year. So we can now simply drag and drop the year into the axis area, which is a nice first step. The problem is that we don't see any values for the corresponding years. This means we can now also add the GDP data, so our second field here, and drag and drop this into the y-axis area of our visual down here, like this. Now we have x-axis values in our visual, the different years, and for each individual year we have y-axis values. These are our GDP data. And the problem is that we actually have the GDP data for different countries. At the moment we just have the sum of the GDP for all of these countries. This brings us to our third field that we have in our data, the country field, and we can now simply drag and drop this into the legend area of our chart. With this, we see that we have a differentiation for each individual country by color, which makes this chart a lot more insightful. The problem though is that we have too many countries. What we could do now is we could reduce the amount of countries being displayed, for example, to the top 4 countries by the GDP, so only to the top 4 countries that have the largest GDP in our dataset. We mentioned this filters column already, which we can collapse or expand right here. In this filters column, we can see that we have 3 different filter options in our visual. These are the 3 fields that we added to the visual. And if I want to filter for specific countries by the GDP as value, I can simply go to the country filter now. So I hover over this area, click onto this lower arrow, and with that open the filter menu for this specific field. We won't use the basic filtering here, so we can open this drop down and instead use the top N filter, this one here. And top N here now allows us to only show the top or also the bottom if we want to, but we will go with the top. And now the top 4 countries in my case by a specific value, and the value here is the GDP. Therefore, we can again go to the fields area and drag and drop the GDP field into that filter. Now we only have to apply the filter by clicking this option down here. And with this, our chart now only shows the top 4 countries by GDP, which are China, Germany, Japan, and the United States. And now you might say, well, this chart doesn't look too fancy. Why don't we use a more fancy visual type here? This is also possible because we can dynamically change the visual we're currently using by simply selecting the current visual. This is important, so if you click anywhere else in this report, you see that the menu here changes. But if I select the visual like this, you see we have all our options back. And now if I, for example, select this map visual here, this globe symbol, if I do so, then we should actually see a world map, but in our case, this is not working here. This can happen in Power BI Desktop. It's a very powerful tool with lots of options, also related to security. In this case, we can simply go to the options and enable these map visuals. For this, we can navigate to the File menu. There go to Options and Settings. Go to Options. And now access the Security menu. If we scroll down a bit here, we can simply enable the Use Map and Filled Map Visuals option by ticking this box. And with OK now, down here, the error still is displayed, but if we now switch back to our column chart once again, and then reselect the map, then the map here is finally loaded. You see that I now have a map with the 4 different countries selected in my previous visual, and the bigger the GDP is, the bigger this bubble here gets. What we could do now is, as well, the differentiation for the different years is not too helpful, we can simply go to the legend area and simply remove that field by clicking onto this X symbol. With this, we now have 4 bubbles here in our map, which looks quite nice actually. We could now just add a data label with the corresponding country name here. And to do that, we can simply navigate into a different area in our visual. So we are again in the visualizations column. And now we leave our fields options here and go to the Format menu. If we select this menu, we can simply add the category labels here. If we turn this on, you see we now have the United States, Germany, China, and Japan once again. And with that, we actually finished our first visual already. Now, this is just a quick preview of a lot of features we have in the query editor and also in this data model part. But I hope you saw that Power BI is really easy to use and that great looking visuals can be created quite easily. What's missing here though is saving our project, of course, an important aspect, otherwise we use our work. And this can simply be done by going to this Save option up here. If we click it, we can now select a specific area where this project should be saved. And I'll give it a file name of initial project. Finished maybe. And by saving this, we get this PBIX file. These are Power BI project files. And with that, we can now close this Power BI project and continue with this Getting Started module.